Hello everyone, Big Clinky here, and it's time for the prerequisite end of series update video. One thing I've recently come to realize about these videos is that they can sometimes be funny to look back on when I end up doing series that I originally promised I wouldn't, or otherwise changing plans. Like, in many of my earlier update videos, I stressed at length on how I would never play Persona 4 on the channel, and then look what happened. So, yeah, I like to think of these as moments in history for this channel. So, this time, we've just got done with Final Fantasy XII The Zodiac Age. There is going to be post-game, but I might want to hold off on that until I start uploading another game as a main series, and then maybe do a few FF12 post-game videos intermittently whenever I need more footage for something. Speaking of which, in between 12 and the next series I plan on doing, I might upload some Persona 4 bonus videos that I promised that I would do earlier. Mostly the alternate drama social link, which I have all the footage for. The only reason I didn't upload that any earlier is because it's already out there all over YouTube, so chances are the majority of P4 fans have already seen it, but I may as well upload it to make my series more complete. Now, what isn't commonly found are the Mr. Edagawa's TV Classroom bonus videos, and I might also do some of those, because I do find those interesting and they're not talked about that often. Now, I know I'm inevitably going to get asked when are the P3 and PQ super bosses. They're going to take a lot more preparation. I'll do them when I'm in the mood for them, but they will take a while, especially P3, because 1, I haven't played that game in ages, and 2, I need to prepare a lot of personas and skill fusions for a New Game Plus file. I already talked about my overall thoughts on Final Fantasy XII as a project in the credits of that series, but in summary, I do understand why not a lot of people on the channel would have been interested in that. It's not the kind of game that I've done a lot of, it's a series that I've never done a game in before, but it is one that I have always wanted to record on the channel for a long time, even before Zodiac Age existed. And it does mean a lot to me, as it was my first non-Pokemon JRPG. To all of those who did watch it, I'm glad you enjoyed, and to those who didn't, that's completely fine. You might enjoy the next series that I have planned, which I will confirm is definitely going to be tiering Saga. This is something that I wanted to get official confirmation out about, because some people in my community posts didn't realize that I definitely planned on covering this game, and soon. But in hindsight, I am glad that I held off on jumping into this, because there's actually a lot of information about this game and secrets to it that I really needed to research. I've cross-referenced several walkthroughs, because most of them don't have complete information or are outright wrong about certain things while being right about others. And included in my research are some notes from the Japanese walkthrough website Pegasus Night that I went ahead and translated myself, as well as a Spanish walkthrough. Another reason why I'm glad I held off on this is that I only recently discovered a series of blog posts from the person who did the most recent fan translation, explaining some of the challenges they had in some translations, as well as a few changes they made, and some posts by them on the Fire Emblem subreddit going into more detail about the process of creating the patch. The only thing that I'm really missing at this point, research-wise, is apparently Shozo Kaga released a lot of notes in his development blog that explain some things like the reasons why he named certain characters and other aspects of the game and the world building, and what he drew from real-life mythology. I've only found a few of these, so if anybody has any links to the full series of Kaga blogs, that would be helpful if I need things to talk about in later parts where I've already explained most of the gameplay. Which leads me to the big thing. The first few videos of this series are going to take a lot of planning. I might even test record them a few times myself just to get an estimate of how much time they're going to take. Because a lot of people have wondered just how different and how similar this game is to Fire Emblem. The answer is that it is literally a Fire Emblem game in everything but name, and all of its gameplay works like Fire Emblem, apart from maybe 5% of it. But the few parts of it that don't work exactly like Fire Emblem are very, very strange. And that's going to be a problem when it comes to explaining the basic gameplay in the early videos. The other thing is, this is a Fire Emblem game on the PlayStation, and a Japanese-only PlayStation release at that, which means that Circle is confirm and X is cancel, and I need to explain a whole lot of other things about how the basic controls work in the early parts. On top of this, there are 6 recruitable characters I need to give bios to in the first chapter alone. And there's even more joining in Chapter 2, some of which come as a result of a mutually exclusive choice between 4 characters, only one of which you can recruit. So yeah, long story short, there is a heck of a lot of information to cover in the first few videos of Tearing Saga, and I am really racking my brain right now as to how to go about presenting it all. I'm even contemplating doing the early character bios in separate videos, because there I'm going to have to explain the stats, how promotions work, how skills work in this game, the fact that forced dismounting indoors is a thing in Tearing Saga, so that affects mounted units, how supports work, which is pretty complicated as well. Yeah, there's just a lot to go over. So speaking of which, here is my second prototype of the character bios, taking into account some of the comments that I received when I posted this as a community post. I still want to make sure that promotion gains are very prominent in these bios because they're a big deal in this game, and this is one of those games where promoting early is highly recommended. I know promoting early is always recommended because pitfalls, but it's especially true of Tearing Saga. I've also changed how I worded something in the supports list. So, this game has a pretty big cast of characters, and because it's fairly obscure, I don't want to spoil who ends up becoming recruitable. Because of this, on a character's supports and supported by listings, yes, supports are one way in Tearing Saga unless specified otherwise, and those percentages are a boost to hit, avoid, critical, and critical avoid. They range anywhere from 5%, sometimes lower, up to 15%. But characters will only be listed here by name if they've already joined by the time we recruit this character. Anybody who joins later, I'll be listing just by the map number they join in. It should be obvious once that character joins who they are. So I originally listed this as just map number, but that led to a lot of comments saying, this character supports a map, I didn't know you could do that. Jokingly, of course, but still, I wanted to make it a bit clearer. So, do you think that things like joins M25 and joins M26 make sense? As always, feedback is much appreciated. So, that's basically all I wanted to talk about when it comes to what's next. I'll be working on getting Tearing Saga ready for probably the next few weeks while I upload some Persona 4 bonus videos. If I'm really strapped for footage, I might do a little bit of the FF12 post-game, but we'll see. I also have a decently good idea of what might happen after Tearing Saga, which will probably be into the last quarter of the year, and that is that I definitely want to do Trails in the Sky the third afterwards. This is a game that likely won't require much preparation other than just playing through the game once myself, although I will have to play on Nightmare difficulty since this is the first Trails game and one of the only Trails games to have trophies requiring you to play on Nightmare. Thankfully, Nightmare is way more balanced here than it is in SC. In fact, I'm really looking forward to Sky the Third because it is currently my favourite game in the series, though that might change once I play Crossbell. I think its story is really great. It's a bit more self-contained than most Trails game stories are, which might be a plus. It also has fantastic gameplay. The imbalance between physical attacks and arts in FC and SC is completely gone. Basically, Sky the Third made it so that everyone is broken, and when everyone's broken, no one is. Except for a certain character who still sucks, but I'll get to them when I play the game. Sky the Third also has one of my favourite soundtracks of any video game, if not my actual favourites. Despite being in the same engine and using a lot of the same locations as Sky FC and SC, I was really surprised on my first playthrough to find out that most of the third soundtrack is completely new compositions. And I don't even mean new orchestrations of FC and SC songs, I mean completely new songs. But there's another possibility of something happening this year on this channel. Recently, there was an announcement, well, more like a leak, that I was desperately hoping was true, but I wasn't getting my hopes up until official confirmation happened, but it did. Great Ace Attorney is finally getting localized. And so here's the thing, I am a massive Ace Attorney fan, and I really enjoyed playing Spirit of Justice on the channel when that first came out. I would really like to record Great Ace Attorney. There is a major problem though. I gave up hope on these games ever being localized, and because of this, I spoiled myself on them. I know the basic outline of the plot, I know who the culprits are for all the cases, and I've also extensively watched some, but not all, of the cases and trials in Japanese. And in fact, I even translated a bit of them on my own time just for fun. So if I did play these, they would definitely not be blind, and Ace Attorney or just mystery game in general playthroughs I think are much better blind, because I already know the solutions to, again, not all, but some of the puzzles. I would be blind on the actual localization though, as well as any optional investigation dialogues or silly press conversations or things like that. And I should also mention that I have not seen any footage of the fan translations. All I've seen is raw Japanese gameplay. So I wouldn't have any biases against the official localization because I'd seen a different translation. I would also be able to give some context on the Meiji Restoration period because I actually did study that in university. So a non-blind playthrough is possible, I just wonder how many people here would actually care about it not being blind. However, I do have another idea of something I could do with this game. However, I'm not going to make any promises, because it would require a lot of setup, and it would be something that I would have to test a lot on my own time, and there are many possible ways that it could go horribly wrong. So, again, I am not going to promise this, but I think I will try. I won't say what it is that I'm planning on doing here, just in case it falls through. I don't want to end up disappointing anyone. But it is an idea that I have that I'm very excited to at least try out. And we'll see if it ends up working or not. That's all for the near future and possible near future projects that I wanted to go over. But there are a few more ideas I had for the channel that I wanted to talk about as well. So, earlier on this year, I found out, thanks to a few people in the comments, so yeah, I'm really grateful for this, that the PlayStation Network made Ratchet & Clank 2006, the tie-in game for the movie, free on the PlayStation Store for 1 month. So I downloaded that and I played it, and, well, it was, one, refreshing to play something that isn't a JRPG and that I can actually beat in like 5 to 10 hours. But I ended up really enjoying the game. From a gameplay standpoint at least, I think it's one of the best games in the whole series. I made a few community posts on this, and some of you may have got the impression that I really didn't like the game from them. It's more that the fact that the gameplay is so good just makes me frustrated at some elements of the story suffering due to being forced to follow the movie, some of the cutscenes being taken directly from the movie, and therefore recording the game would be a massive copyright nightmare, and the main thing is how infuriatingly handholdy a lot of the dialogue is during the stages. The characters just don't shut up, and the majority of the dialogue is just stating the obvious. Like, after seeing this, I do not get why people accuse JRPGs and modern Pokemon of being handholdy. At least those games don't have NPCs telling you, Ratchet, we should get to the station, when you are literally right outside the station. Or perhaps even more infuriatingly, having a character constantly nag you to activate a bolt crank when you're trying to explore an enemy base for secrets. Like, this is what the memes say that Navi was like in Ocarina of Time, and she was never like this, but imagine if all of the memes about her were true, and all of their nagging was fully voice acted. Yeah, you can turn down the voice volume, but that will also mute the few genuinely funny lines as well, so it's kind of a trade-off. I don't have a PS5 yet, so I'm not going to be able to play Rift Apart when it launches, but I am really hoping they tone down this kind of dialogue in that game. Because if the 2016 game lacked that, it would probably be my favourite in the whole series. The gameplay is great, and all the weapons are actually balanced quite well, I feel. The closest thing to a bad weapon I found was the Proton Drum, and even that turned out to be surprisingly decent in New Game Plus with all of its Raritanium upgrades. So, where am I going with this? Why did I just rant about Ratchet & Clank for a while? Well, after I finished up getting the Platinum Trophy in this game, I decided to go back and replay Ratchet & Clank 3, which used to be my favourite in the series, just to see if it still held up to this day. And, overall, I still think that it's fantastic, easily one of my favourites in the series, and one of my favourite games of all time, but I have noticed a few flaws in it that I didn't notice when I first played it. Ratchet & Clank 2 and 3 were always neck and neck for me when it came to my favourite game in the series, and now I feel like maybe I like 2 more. But 3 is still fantastic and only like 0.2 points lower in my rating scale. Which, strangely, is exactly how I feel about Crash Bandicoot 2 and 3 after having replayed Crash 3 for the channel last year. What I'm trying to say is that Ratchet & Clank 2 and 3 are some of my favourite games of all time, and I would like to maybe record them on the channel at some point. There is a problem though. Ratchet & Clank 1. I don't like 1 nearly as much as 2 and 3. It lacks a lot of the features that would become standard in later games, especially the RPG elements with the weapons. Ratchet has a different voice actor and a vastly different personality to later installments. There's just a lot about it that feels awkward, but at the same time, speaking of awkward, there are some plot elements of 1 that are continued in 2 and 3. You really need to play the whole original trilogy to get the full storyline. And it would feel awkward to force myself to do a playthrough of a game that I like less just to be able to record 2 games that I really like, but at the same time, launching straight into RNC 2 would also feel awkward. And it's not like I can just play the vastly improved gameplay-wise 2016 version, because it's not like that game is a remake. It's actually its own thing that just happens to share some of the same planets as Ratchet & Clank 1. That's the way Insomniac have described it. It is not a remake of the first game, it's not a reboot of the series, it is the game based on the movie based on the game. It's its own thing, and its story is not even canon to the main series. But thinking about it, I realise what I might be able to do as a compromise. You see, I have actually never played Ratchet & Clank 1 since the very first time that I did, when I was like maybe 12 or 13. In fact, I have never beaten the final boss of Ratchet & Clank 1, and have never seen its ending before. So, I thought that after I did Final Fantasy XII as a rediscovery run, maybe I could do the same thing with Ratchet & Clank 1. The advantage is that it would be a much shorter game than Final Fantasy XII, so it would make a great interim project between things. And it would also open up the possibility of doing Ratchet & Clank 2 and 3 as interim projects later. And I wonder if I went back to 1, if maybe I could find a lot more to like about it. Maybe some things in it age better than I thought they did. A lot of people have also been re-evaluating the widely hated Jerk Ratchet arc from the first game these days, and feeling like it actually feels like natural character development that fits with the later games. So I'd like to see what I think of that going back. Overall, this could be a future, fun, short interim project, Ratchet & Clank 1 Rediscovery. And as for other short platform game interim projects, I will do Crash Bandicoot 1 eventually. I just didn't want every single interim project after a long JRPG to be a Crash Bandicoot game. And one day I'll probably do Spyro Reignited Trilogy, but I am saving that as a co-commentary series with my sister when she's up to it. So we'll see when I can organise that. And on the subject of platform games that I might record in the future, I currently have no plans to do Jak and Daxter. I know that goes along with Ratchet and Clank for some people, but I always liked Ratchet and Clank much more than Jak and Daxter. I still liked those games, but Ratchet certainly was a bigger part of my childhood. It was the exact reverse of Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, where, while I liked both, I always liked Crash more. In the second generation, I just ended up liking Insomniac's property a lot more. Now just a few random thoughts on possible future projects. I did float the idea of Digital Devil Saga earlier this year, and that might even be something I consider doing after Trails in the Sky the Third. I'll just probably need a lot of time to prepare a save file in advance for the very infamous Superboss. Let's just say there's a reason why I'm absolutely not scared at all of Final Fantasy XII's 50 million HP Superboss, but I am kinda scared about the Digital Devil Saga one. And then there's Persona 5. So, I had so much fun with Persona 4 last year, more than I ever thought I would, and I do really like doing Persona games on this channel. In fact, the focus of the channel may be moving towards that, since I am running out of Fire Emblem games that I actually like. After Tearing Saga, it's really just Shadow Dragon, FE7, and maybe Thracia, and also a possible redo of Fire Emblem 4, but I feel like Fire Emblem 4 is inevitably next in the line for being remade. And then Echoes. I love Echoes' voice acting and presentation, but I really don't like its gameplay at all. Oh yeah, and of course, the Three Houses, I did promise that I'd do Golden Deer at one point. Yeah, I want to wait until the honeymoon period for Three Houses has well and truly worn off, and even almost 2 years later, I still don't feel like it has. There's also a massive amount of stuff that I need to research for that game. For example, I think people have only just started to figure out exactly how the greenhouse system works. From what I've read, it's more complicated than anything in the battle system. Okay, yeah, that was a bit of a tangent, but what I'm saying is, I might be focusing more on Persona stuff later on, and Persona 5 would definitely go with that, but just like with Three Houses, there is that kind of honeymoon period, and I often like to go into Persona games a little bit after their initial releases, and after it's, really popular to cover them, because I feel like people start to look at them with a much fresher perspective at that point. Seriously, it took years for people to realize that Persona 4 was much more than just an anime waifu game. And these days, sometimes P5 is only looked at in that light as well. The funny thing is that a while ago, I was thinking to myself, I don't really want to do Persona 5 soon because, it's still really big and popular, there are a lot of other YouTubers who've covered it and got really famous because of it. To many casual RPG fans, Persona 5 is a flawless masterpiece, and I personally don't think of it that highly, so I don't want to feel unfair to those people. And then I realized that all of those thoughts were exactly the same thoughts that I used to have towards Persona 4, and, well, you know what happened there. So I'm sure one of these days, maybe even next year, I will feel up to doing Persona 5, and I probably will really enjoy it, but it's gonna be a very long one. And also, Persona 5 Strikers is a thing, and I absolutely love Strikers. In fact, I'm currently playing Merciless, and I am literally the only person I know who is enjoying Merciless so far. It's just everyone is saying that Merciless is horrible and everything just one-shots you and bosses are damage sponges and it's really unfair. And I feel like I'm in some kind of parallel universe because Merciless is some of the most fun I've had in the game in a long time. So yeah, I do want to play Strikers on the channel at some point too, but I have to play the original P5 to do that. But in between Persona 4 and 5, I might also want to do the arena games because they are canon to the storyline. I'm thinking though, for the first arena, I am definitely not going to show every character's story. My current plan is to just do Yosuke's, because that's the one that many people consider canon, and it's also the one the manga went with. Then Labrys, because her story is actually a backstory that is canon to everybody's roots. And also Elizabeth, because her route is hilarious. As for Ultimax, that game has just a P4 route and a P3 route, and I vastly prefer the P3 route, so I'll probably be treating that one as the main one for the playthrough, though I might also play the P4 route at some points. Sadly, I've heard that the P4 route is considered canon, which annoys me because I think the P3 route is not only much better, it actually does the Persona 4 cast more justice than their own route does, in my opinion. Oh, I just realized I probably need to get the Episode of Dachi DLC before the PlayStation Store dies. Or, I think they're not killing the PS3 store? Please correct me on that if I'm wrong, because if that's the case, I do need to quickly get that DLC while I still can. But anyway, sorry that got a bit rambly towards the end. I have less organised thoughts for things that I want to do after this year, but I still definitely have a lot of plans, so those of you who've stuck with this channel, I definitely hope to continue doing this, and I will see you all next time for some Persona 4 bonus videos, and then Tiering Saga. So, see you all then.